Okay, Dr. Matthew J. Trom here. Welcome back from your break. We are on what should be the last lecture of the lecture series on trademarks, talking about intellectual property within the creative ideation module of the course. And we're just talking about the five different kind of types of trademarks and the ones that you want to kind of gravitate towards as you're thinking of naming your company or naming your brands. And we talked about generic and descriptive trademarks being ones that you want to try to avoid because typically, even if you're using them, in the practice of operating your company, if you try to apply for trademark protection through USPTO, those types of trademarks usually are not um, trademarkable, not registerable at the federal level, and don't qualify for trademark protection because they are kind of too general, right? They use words that are um, descriptive, but in a very kind of direct way, such that it would be possible for sort of anybody who's making a product in the same space to describe their products using similar means. So we stumbled here upon the first of the five types of trademarks that generally can be registered with USPTO. Those are suggestive trademarks, and I talked about this one already. In that, if you've got a word, we'll just go back one slide here. If you've got a word that you want to somehow associate with your brand, like energy soda, for example, you can't use the word energy because it's just too direct, right? Too descriptive of precisely what it is that your product does. In this case, it's a soda that's full of sugar and um, caffeine, presumably. And so, like anybody who makes soda could describe their soda as an energy soda, and so this descriptive trademark is not particularly good. Whereas hummingbird soda, hummingbirds are animals that exude an enormous amount of energy. So even though you're not using the word energy, you're sort of referring to it through thought and imagination. This likely will be accepted by USPTO because it's more of a metaphor than it is an actual use of a word that's descriptive of your product. So if we move on then to the next one, the fourth type of trademark is the one that is arbitrary, in which you use a common word, but you use a common word that's like not in the same context of the brand or of the product in the market segment that you are going for, right? So they use the example here of moon soda, right? So moon, yes, okay, that's a common word that we use, in language. It's an object in the sky and so forth, but ultimately it would be very difficult to kind of directly relate the concept of a moon to the concept of a can of soda, right? So it's sort of this arbitrary choice that because of the lack of direct linkage between the symbol or the word moon and what everybody thinks of as soda, the drink that gives you energy. Um, this one would probably be accepted because it's not something that would be in common use among competing products in your particular market sector. So they've got kind of Moon Soda as one example, and then they use Apple as another trademark describing Apple computers, right? So Apple is a fruit; it doesn't have any suggestion at all, or any ingredient, or any characteristic or quality that in any way suggests a computer. Thus, it's an arbitrary trademark. Um, so okay, so then let's move on to the last one. So these are fanciful trademarks. This is the fifth type of trademark, and these are becoming more and more kind of common as people are creating companies in kind of the 21st century where they're needing to navigate the internet and the restrictions of coming up with domain names, right? So fanciful trademarks are basically invented words, so words that don't exist in the native language, in the English language. Um, but are just sort of combinations of letters that create sounds that convey some meaning after the brand is associated with the company that produces the product. So the example that they give here is, I don't even know how to pronounce this, soda, right? So it's just this random combination of letters, but kind of a better example. Well, they give a bunch here. So kind of combinations of letters that sound like they could be words and maybe convey, some sort of meaning, some sort of synesthetic meaning, but ultimately aren't words in the English language. So Exxon, Clorox, Kodak, Xerox, Zillow, and so forth are these sort of fanciful words. Other ones that you might think of would be things like, Google, for example, right? So the word Google didn't actually, exist in any kind of meaningful way in the English language until the company co-opted it as its name. So yes, you could certainly come up with just some random combination of letters, and you would very likely be able to get that registered with USPTO as a trademark. But you do have to be a little bit careful, right? Because DDS. DFDES, right? Not so easy to remember that combination of letters, whereas something like Google or Xerox is a bit easier to remember and is a much stronger brand as a result. Um, okay, so that covers the 5 types of trademarks. And then the last thing that I just want to spend a few moments talking about is considerations to establish a trademark. So, what would you, as the owner of a company who's trying to solidify and trademark a brand, what do you actually have to do step by step to trademark, officially trademark with USPTO your product or your brand? So, the first thing to do is to seek distinctiveness, right? So we want trademarks that fall into those 3 categories where ultimately, if we apply to USPTO, we would be successful in getting trademark recognition, trademark registration. So we want fanciful marks, we want arbitrary marks, we want suggestive marks. We do not want descriptive marks or generic marks. So just a few more examples. Verizon is a fanciful mark, right? Because it's not a word in the English language. It sort of sounds like it could be a word, right? Like verify and horizon maybe stuck together would make Verizon, but by itself, it's just a made up word. But we know this brand as a telecommunications cell phone telemarketing company because they've done such a good job of attaching this idea of Verizon, right, to the idea of cell phones and communicating over a telegraphy network. So the next one, of course, is arbitrary marks. So we talked already about Apple Computer and Apple Computer being an example of an arbitrary mark. So apples, yes, are just a common noun that's used in normal language, but you would not associate an apple with a computer. And so therefore this sort of use of an arbitrary word to be distinguished as part of a computer company, a representative of a computer company, makes it arbitrary and therefore patentable. And then the final one, of course, is suggestive marks. And we've got another example here, which is chicken of the sea, right? So chicken of the sea is basically a seafood company, right? But very clearly there aren't chickens floating around in the sea. And so this sort of implies, yes, chicken is kind of food and food that comes from the sea, and yes, but ultimately, chicken of the sea is suggestive, but not to the point of being descriptive, right? Because there is no such thing as a chicken of the sea. So those are the types of marks that we want to go for in terms of seeking distinctiveness. The next thing you want to do, even if you don't intend to go all the way and get the Circle R registered trademark from USPTO, is to nonetheless perform a USPTO trademark search to make sure that by adopting a particular brand, a particular combination of letters, word, sound, whatever it is, that you are not going to be in violation of somebody else's trademark. Now, keep in mind, if some other company has the same word as you want to use in your brand, but they are in a different market sector, it is okay for you to go ahead and use that word in your market sector so long as you are very clearly differentiated from the other user of that word or brand or symbol or whatever it is, in terms of different market sectors. Another thing to take into consideration, which is relatively new development in the world of trademarks, is the fact that there's only going to be one unique web domain available for a particular brand, at least associated with .com, right? So you could go with .net or .org if you're a nonprofit organization, and now there's of course a bunch of other first level domains that are available, but are a lot less popular than .com. And so another thing to just consider when you're thinking about how to brand and trademark your company is what's the domain name that you might use to make your brand unique from all the other ones. And there's a lot fewer choices in terms of web domains than there are in terms of USPTO options, because USPTO allows different companies again to use the same name if they're in different market domains. To use the same name as another company, you literally have to grab a different first level domain, right? So something other than .com if somebody's already got your .com domain name. So this is another thing to consider before you completely commit to a particular brand, whether you can get a viable domain name for your company or for your product. And then once you've got that that trademarkable brand identified, then go ahead and create the brand and make sure that you document the creation of the brand and the use of the brand, so that if you need to register with USPTO or fight some sort of infringement battle, you've got the documentation that allows you to do that. So once you've got your brand sorted out, then you have to use it as quickly as possible. Claim it by putting trademark or service mark on it, and document its use, day and time of its first use, and then take a screenshot of the first time that you used it in some sort of outward facing document. Keep the document and make sure that you're consistent and continuing to use the trademark symbol with that brand every single time that you use that brand in any sort of outward facing or advertising document of any kind. And then once you're ready, once you've jumped through all the hoops and you've established this as a viable brand that you've trademarked and you've claimed it by putting a TM after it, then please hire a lawyer. Don't do this just based on my advice. Talk to a lawyer before you do it. But then register your brand with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, which again you can do by yourself, but better to have legal help to do that. So register with USPTO, and then of course you have to defend your trademark if some company comes along and tries to infringe on it, right? So some company that is a competitor in your particular market sector might come along, whether intentional or not, and start to use your brand or something very close to your brand to market and sell their own products. And so you need to be vigilant for that type of infringement, and you need to defend against it. You need to defend your own brand if needed, if somebody begins to infringe on a trademark that you hold. So that would initially be a cease and desist letter, and then if that action is not stopped, it probably means lawyering up and getting a lawyer involved to make sure that your rights as the trademark holder are upheld. Okay, so those are the steps to walk through. That gets us to the end of this set of slides. So thank you for your time and listening and your attention, and look forward to seeing you in class. All right, take care. Bye.